It is probably the coolest location in Pokémon Legends ZA. Hidden underneath a now abandoned Lysandre cafe still lies Lysandre Labs, a former key hideout for Team Flare. When Grizel and Grisham reveal themselves to be members of a Team Flare splinter group known as Team Flare Nouveau, they invite you to take a look for yourself to learn the truth about AZ, the ultimate weapon, and Lysandre aka L. As such, it serves as a dumping ground for a lot of the background lore of Kalos, part of which was already known from X and Y, part of which is brand new. But that is not the lore I'm here to tell you. Because hidden within the deserted halls of Lysandre Labs still lie untold stories. Stories about how Team Flare operated, and how Lysandre's entire empire eventually came crumbling down like his hideout in Geosenge Town. Because yeah, let's get that very clear, I have seen some people recently confuse Lysandre Labs with Team Flare's secret HQ in Geosenge Town, and don't get me wrong, I understand why, especially if it's been a while since you last played X and Y. But the two really are completely different, even if they are linked. Under Geosenge Town is Team Flare's headquarters. This is where you catch Xerneas or Yveltal, depending on your version. It's where the ultimate weapon is located and fired from, something I can definitely see people getting mixed up, due to how often Legends ZA refers to this event as if it happened in Lumio City, when that's not the case. Plus, it's where Lysandre meets his apparent demise at the end of X and Y, before obviously returning in Legends ZA. On the other hand, Lysandre Labs is a location we passed through earlier in X and Y. It's more of a research center, like the name implies, and it contains a lot of information about Team Flare's plans and the region's history, as well as plenty of scientists, researchers and of course grunts. All notable members of Team Flare, barring Malva, are fought in this location in X and Y, including Lysandre and Mabel, as well as Emma in the post-game under the alias Essentia, because she was under the control of her suit and Zerozig. Point being, while the location in Geosenge Town may be called the headquarters, Lysandre Labs honestly fills that role more. It's in a central location to the region, it's packed with people, unlike the Geosenge branch, including all admins, and it seems likely the only reason the Geosenge hideout even exists is because the ultimate weapon was located there. Yeah, make no mistake, Team Flare reactivated the ultimate weapon, they didn't build another one. Therefore, Geosenge Town would always have to have a Team Flare hideout, were their plans to ever succeed. And nothing shows better how important Lysandre Labs was for Team Flare operation than the fact that, while the ultimate weapon may not be here, it is activated from this location. Alright, so that's about all the backstory you need to realize how vital and important Lysandre Labs was for Team Flare's operation. It is never stated in Legends ZA how exactly Team Flare's demise went. We know from X and Y that it wasn't immediate, as in the moment the player defeats Lysandre, as Zerozig is still active in the postgame. It is worth pointing out though that while Zerozig is not acting completely alone, he does his work from a hidden floor in Lysandre Labs that was only known about by certain admins. It also doesn't make an appearance whatsoever in Legends ZA, even though both Emma and Mabel should know about it. Anyway, we do know that eventually, the higher-ups from Team Flare were supposedly rounded up. Mabel mentions that's why she's director of the Pokemon Research Lab. She didn't apply for the job, it is essentially her punishment. Grisham and Grizel were mere grunts at the time and do not appear to have been arrested for their allegiance to Team Flare, although it does cause them to receive quite some hate and vitriol from the Kalos population. As such, it feels safe to say most lower ranked members of the organization probably got out on their own accord, as Team Flare had clearly failed their mission and was completely without leadership. Evidence of this can also be seen in Legends ZA. Plenty of items, elements and objects that would surely be of interest to police or other authorities are left completely untouched for presumably 5 full years, indicating the place was never really swept or anything. Everyone working there just left suddenly or over time. We know plenty of people lived in the labs, as we come across the private quarters. If this was purely a place for work, that wouldn't be needed. As Grisham and Grizel explain, no one was interested in buying Lysandre Cafe and starting anew there either, because it had such a negative reputation, meaning that there was also never a chance a new owner could have reported finding Lysandre Labs behind that cabinet. As such, it seems safe to say that very few people have set foot in Lysandre Labs in the last 5 years, if any at all, until we start digging into the history the city would like to forget about. But that does leave one very interesting question. If the only entrance into Lysandre Labs is via the door behind the cabinet, which it is, we never see another entrance or exit in either X and Y or Legends ZA. How did all those wild Pokemon end up inside? After all, we're who knows how many feet on the ground, and the only entrance is hidden behind a cabinet. Good luck to that group of Ekans to try moving it without even having limbs. But then I looked deeper into it. And what if I told you there is actually a completely plausible reason for why these few Pokemon species are here? And even better, most of them actually illustrate what may have happened in and to Lysandre Labs in various ways. Let me start by getting two species out of the way that are explainable in super mundane ways, just to start us off easy. The first is already mentioned, Ekans. Well, in Arbok, but it's much more likely that these Pokemon came here unevolved and then evolved while here. Ekans is the only Pokemon found in Lysandre Labs that can learn Dig, which makes it completely viable for Ekans to not have moved that cabinet and instead just end up here while digging through the soil. Another simple one is Noibat, and once again Noivern. Bats are masters of finding their way into confined, abandoned and preferably underground spaces. As the international organization focused on bat conservation puts it, if you can get your pinky finger in somewhere, a bat can get in. Which means that they need significantly less than the actual entrance to get in, and it's completely possible that there are ways inside that wouldn't even be noteworthy enough to render, but would presumably be enough for a Noibat to sneak its way in. With those two settled, that leaves 4 more evolution lines that can be found in Lysandre Labs, and for them, the reason is everything but mundane. After all, ask yourself, how the hell do Houndour, Beldum, Electrike and Honedge get into this facility? It genuinely feels inexplicable for them to be here. They cannot get this far underground naturally, and it's very unlikely they entered through the door as well. So that was also my conclusion. These 4 lines didn't enter the facility. They were already inside. They didn't have to find a way in, because unlike the grunts and the researchers, they never found a way out. And there is a lot of evidence for this. First off, both Houndoom and Manectric are frequently used Pokemon among the Team Flare ranks. In fact, the very first Team Flare grunts we ever fight have a Houndour and an Electrike. That's how prevalent they are. In X and Y, there are also grunts using them inside Lysandre Labs, and Houndour and Manectric are also used by Celosia and Mabel. So point being, Team Flare clearly has easy access to these Pokemon, which can mean one of two things. Either Team Flare bred them for use among their ranks, in which case it seems likely Lysandre Labs was their breeding ground, seeing as it was functionally their headquarters as established earlier. We can then assume that while their actual trainers didn't abandon their Pokemon, perhaps there were simply too many little Houndour and Electrike to bring along, meaning some of them stayed behind and formed the groups we see in Legends ZA. For presumably the same reason, one of the stones, found around round 10, is also still present in the abandoned lab. No grunt ever took it with them, and the police never swept it either. So that's one option. It's not super nice, but it's not super evil either. The other possibility, it's a little crueler. Both of these Pokemon are based on dogs, I don't have to tell you that. And it is well known that in our real world, dogs are traditionally among the most used test animals, especially mammals, alongside mice, rats and primates. As such, it is not out of the question that this is the reason why such a significant number of dog Pokemon were present in Lysandre Labs, even at the time it was running. In that light, it is also worth pointing out that Houndoom and Manectric may very well have been preferred over say Stoutland or Granbull, despite both also being found in Kalos because they have a Mega Evolution. We know Team Flare researched this heavily, as the Mega Evolution symbol can be found on whiteboards all over the facility, further building up this connection. Another piece of evidence that suggests this may have been true instead of the breeding for fighting theory is Beldum. Metagross also has a Mega after all. It is true that one was introduced in ORAS, but that doesn't necessarily mean Team Flare didn't already know about it and wanted to research it. Now, of course Beldum doesn't remotely resemble a real-life testing animal, but from a Pokemon standpoint there is a lot of reason to research here. So much is still unknown about this evolution line, down to the very real possibility that they hail from space. It's entirely possible Team Flare was looking into that. After all, not all their work was for the sake of their ultimate plan. Lysandre Labs was also behind the Holocaster, they also made legit discoveries. Furthermore, I also want to point out that the Lysandre machine, the special gear Lysandre dons at the climax of X and Y to drain the legendary Pokemon of their power, has these claws that vaguely resemble Beldum. It can be ruled out that Beldum was studied as part of the design work for the Lysandre machine. Honedge too has its own reasons for being studied by Team Flare. It may not have a mega or serve a purpose for a potential machine development, but the Honedge line is deeply rooted in the history of Kalos. Honedge is exclusively found in Pala Lane, the route that is effectively the front yard of the Parvin Palace, home of the former king of Kalos, and Aegislash has several dex entries that mention it fighting alongside kings. Considering that Lysandre and Team Flare had a particular interest in a certain former king of Kalos, it feels quite likely that at one point they studied this line in order to learn more about the history of the region and potentially AZ's past life. As such, all these 4 evolution lines have a very plausible reason as to why Team Flare might have been interested in studying them up close, potentially even experimenting with them. And if some individual Pokemon were still around when Team Flare was abolished, it is not unbelievable at all that they were left behind when everyone else left. But to the credit of Team Flare, there is zero evidence in X and Y to suggest they studied or experimented with Pokemon. Even if the ultimate weapon was originally fired using the life energy of who knows how many dead Pokemon, Team Flare repowered it using electricity, enough to cause blackouts in Lumio City. Sure, they did also need Yveltal or Xerneas, but as far as X and Y actually say, that is the only Pokemon they held captive, and it was for a great obvious purpose. But now, Legends EA changes this. This is currently, at the time of writing, still a spoiler, albeit a minor one, but as data mines show, we will soon get another event mission in order to obtain Mewtwo, just like we recently did for Diancie. It is a very short and brief event, so I don't think it can really be considered a massive spoiler, but since Mewtwo will be obtainable inside Lysandre Labs, there is some minor information shared in this quest that indicates Team Flare did not care for Pokemon as much as the lack of harming them in X and Y may suggest. As Mabel explains after you catch Mewtwo, Team Flare captured the legendary Pokemon in the unknown dungeon after suspecting it was drawn to the region because of the presence of its Megastones. They dubbed it Project M and studied it, but quickly realized Mewtwo wasn't really of any use to them. However, they didn't free it. They just kept it contained, trapped inside Lysandre Labs for a rainy day. It shows that Team Flare was not above studying Pokemon, keeping them essentially captive and then also not freeing them, to the point Mewtwo is still inside Lysandre Labs 5 whole years later until we repower the system and release the locks in this new mission. I can't show it because it isn't out yet, but it is all confirmed this is what's happening in this mission. It is some significant evidence for the theory I have been building here. Not only does it show that Team Flare kept Pokemon for research purposes, even if it proved to be mostly useless, it also shows that the Geosenge Stone wasn't the only thing left behind as Lysandre Labs got abandoned. Mewtwo did as well. A Pokemon. A living, breathing Pokemon. And if you can do that to a legendary Pokemon like this, you can also do that to the Houndour, Electrike, Beldum and Honedge that may have also been used in this facility. But unlike Mewtwo, they presumably weren't trapped behind powerless locks. They could at least roam the halls in relative freedom, which is how we find them in Legends EA. So yeah, that means that every single Pokemon found in Lysandre Labs has a completely fair and plausible explanation as to how they ended up there in the first place, knowing that there are very few ways to get in there. It reveals Lysandre Labs as a place that was really given great care to make sure that it felt like an equally disturbing but also intriguing location to revisit after all these years. It tells us something about how Team Flare operated prior to the events of X and Y, and also how it was eventually abandoned in the time between the game and Legends EA. And even if that maybe doesn't paint the prettiest picture of Team Flare and Lysandre, the fact that it's them, former members of Team Flare and Lysandre himself, that allow us this look inside, shows they aren't afraid to reveal the truth. The truth about AZ, as they say themselves, but also the truth about Team Flare. What do you think happened in Lysandre Labs? Did I miss anything? Share it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribe to the channel to stay updated on all my future Pokemon content coming up. For now, thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.